everyone, it's Brooke Center here. Today we're going to be doing a really cool science experiment, and all that we need for this experiment is 3 pieces of bread and 3 Ziploc bags. So I wanted to do this experiment today because I'm sure you've been hearing a lot either from family members or watching TV about germs and how it's so important to wash your hands. So through this experiment, we are going to see why it's important to wash your hands, what happens when you don't, where are there a lot of germs in your house. We're going to see all that through this experiment. So we're going to start the experiment today, and I'm going to ask you to do a few things on your own throughout the week. And then next week, I'll upload a new video, and we'll check in, and we're going to see how our experiment has progressed and see what's happened. So with that, let's get started. Okay, so you should have your materials now, and like I said, here's the bread, and I want you to keep it in the bag for right now. That's important because we don't want it contaminated yet. And then we have our 3 Ziploc bags and then a Sharpie just for labeling the bags. Okay, so I'm going to explain roughly the experiment that we're going to do today and just give you an overview so you have it in your brain, so then when we do the steps it'll make sense. So like I mentioned, we're going to have our 3 pieces of bread, and what we're going to do is we're going to have 3 bags. They're going to be labeled dirty hands, washed hands, and control, and we are going to be putting 1 piece of bread in each of these bags. So one bread, the control bread, is going to be completely uncontaminated. We aren't going to touch it. It's going to be like how it is right now in the bag, and I'll explain later how we get that piece of bread into the control bag without touching it. And then our second piece of bread, it's going to be in the dirty hands bag. And so this, like, it's you want your hands, you don't want them to be dirty, but you haven't washed them yet. And so you're going to touch the bread, you're going to get your hands on it, you're going to get your germs on it. And we're going to see how many germs you really have on your hands. So once you get your bread all dirty and everything, you're going to put it in your dirty hands bag. And then finally, you're going to wash your hands super well. You're going to wash them for more than 20 seconds like they've been saying to do. And then with your clean hands, you're going to touch it, and then you're going to put it in the washed hands bag. And then throughout the week, we're going to see what happens. We're going to see which bread develops the most mold, what happens to it, and we're just going to examine it, and then we'll check back in next week to see what has happened to our bread. Great. So now you should have 3 bags labeled with control, washed hands, and dirty hands. And it's really important that you label your bags like that because this is what's going to help us keep track of our experiment. And you may be wondering, what does control mean and why do we need to have one? Well, before we get started with the rest of the experiment, we're going to learn a few things that are necessary in completing a science experiment. So let's get into that, and then we'll finish up the experiment. Control or controlled variable. Part of the experiment that is used as a constant and unchanging standard of comparison. In our experiment, that is the piece of uncontaminated bread. Scientific method. Step 1, ask a question. Step 2, make a hypothesis. Step 3, experiment. Step 4, data. Step 5, analyze. Step 6, conclusion. Great. So now that we've learned some of the terms that are necessary and a little bit about the scientific process, the scientific method, we are going to make our own hypothesis. So I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pencil or a pen, and we are going to write our hypothesis. So here, I'll show you my example, and then you can pause the video, and I want you to write down yours. My hypothesis. So a template that you can use to write your hypothesis is you can start with, I hypothesize that, and then whatever you think is going to happen. And for my hypothesis, I wrote that I hypothesize that the bread that was touched with dirty hands will grow the most mold. Okay, so for step 1, as you can see, I'm grabbing the bag, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually flip the bag inside out. And so see, that way my hand is kind of acting like a glove, and I'm going to use that. I'm going to put my hand inside the bread, making sure that I don't touch the bread with my hands, because again, we do not want to contaminate the bread since this is our control piece of bread. So it's a little tricky, but just do your best. You end up getting the piece of bag, and you can flip the bag back inside out, and then just make sure to zip the bag shut nice and tight so that no air can get inside. Step 2 now, so we're going to be doing the dirty hands piece of bread. So I'm reaching into the bread bag and I'm grabbing a piece of bread and I'm just touching all over it, putting my hands on it. Make sure that you didn't wash your hands before doing this because we will be doing the washed hands piece of bread last. So again, I'm just touching it all over and then I am putting it in the Ziploc bag. And then again, I'm making sure to zip the bag shut nice and tight. So here we are in step 3, and I'm going to be washing my hands. And again, you know, it's really important to be washing your hands for at least 20 seconds. You can do that by singing happy birthday twice. Here in this video, I sped it up a little so you didn't have to watch me washing my hands the whole time, but just make sure you're getting all the germs off and they're nice and clean. Now step 4, I've just washed my hands as you saw in the previous video, and I'm being really careful to touch the bag as minimally as possible. And again, I'm doing the same thing that I did with the dirty hands and the bread, and I'm just touching it all over, touching it again, and I'm gonna put it into the Ziploc bag, and again, zipping the Ziploc bag nice and tight. Okay, awesome job. So now you should have your 3 bags with your bread in it. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep them in a cool, like, room temp place, and you're gonna keep them all week. You are not gonna open up the bag. That's really important. You wanna make sure that your bags are sealed really tight. And I'm just gonna leave them on my counter all week. So I'm gonna have them just laid out, and then throughout the week I'm going to check in on them. And again, it's really important not to open the bag. We don't want to contaminate anything that's going on inside. I want to talk about what you're going to be doing throughout the week. So you should have your 3 bags. You're going to have your control bag with your piece of bread in it, your dirty hands bag with your bread in it, and then your washed hands with your bag in it. And so it's really important that in order to keep track of kind of what we're seeing through this experiment, that we log it. And here in this next slide, I'm going to show you an example of the log you can keep. So I suggest doing this once every day, writing something, drawing a picture, so then next week, when we come back after a week, we can see how it's changed over a week, how much time it took, and all of that. So here I will show you an example of the log that you can keep this week. So here's an example of my log that I made, and I just folded a piece of paper into 3 sections, and I included the date, a picture, what I notice, and what I wonder. So feel free to pause this video and use mine as a template for yours, and I just suggest taking this and using it every day to record your observations throughout the week. So through this video, we learned a little bit about the scientific method and what a controlled variable is. I hope that this gave you an idea of what some important things are when we're doing an experiment. Maybe it even inspired you to do your own. So throughout this week, I really encourage you to keep track of how your bread's doing. You can write it in your little journal that we created. Draw a picture, just see what's going on, and then next week I'll have a new video posted with kind of the updates of what happened to my bread, and we'll see if my hypothesis was right, and you can see what happened to your bread and see if your hypothesis was correct. And it's okay, of course, if it wasn't correct, because science is about learning, and regardless of what you you predicted in your hypothesis, you still learned through this experiment. So I hope that you had fun. I hope that you learned some things, and I'm excited to see what our bread does through the next week. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and you have a great day, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.